Hi everyone, this video is on polynomials. So you've made it to a new section in your course, and hopefully you'll like this section more than the exponential functions. So a polynomial means we're going to be working with combinations of numbers and variables. Poly technically means many, and nomials is numbers, so many numbers. When we're dealing with polynomials, there's actually different terms. The term polynomial actually means something that is a string of more than 3 terms, or 4 or more. And when we have these strings of terms, that means that they're connected by a plus or a minus. So for example, this is a polynomial because it's made up of 4x cubed plus 2x squared minus 1/2 x minus 2. So if we look, there are 4 distinct terms, and none of them can be combined together because they all have different variables. Now technically, a polynomial is made up of 4 different monomials. A monomial means one term. And I know what you're thinking. How can this be a monomial when there's a whole bunch of things there? Well, a monomial can be like you're thinking. It could be just the number 6. Or a monomial could be a variable, like the variable x or the variable y. But a monomial can also be a combination of things using multiplication. For example, if I say 7 times m, that is a monomial because they are in one group together. We could make it longer and say something like 4h squared, or even 3x cubed y squared. Even though that's long, it's still a monomial because they're all connected by multiplication. Now a binomial means we're going to put 2 of these terms together. So a binomial, we could take the x and add it to that 6 and get x plus 6. That's a binomial because there's 2 of them. We could also do something like that 3x cubed y squared plus a 4y squared. That's a binomial because they're different and they can't be combined. Even though they both have a y squared, as we'll get to when we get to adding, we can only combine them if they're both identical. So those are different terms. Now a trinomial means 3 terms. So we could take that x plus 6 and add an x squared in the front. So x squared plus x plus 6. That's a trinomial. Or b cubed plus 2b plus 7. Still a trinomial. So the first thing you're going to have to be able to do today is just make sure you know, is it 1 term, 2 terms, 3 terms, or 4 more terms? And they'll ask you which of these look like a binomial. And you just have to look which ones are in chunks of 2. Where you have to be careful is if they give you something like this. They may say 2x cubed y squared plus 4x squared minus x cubed y squared. This looks like a trinomial because there's 3 separate chunks, but if I look closely, this first one and the last one both have an x cubed and a y squared. So that means they're technically the same, and we can just do what it says. We can do 2 minus the 1, and this really means it's 1x cubed y squared, because 2 minus 1 is 1, plus 4x squared. So even though it looked like a trinomial because there were 3 of them, it really is a binomial once we combine like terms. So you're going to need to look out for problems like that. The next thing you need to know is the degree. The degree is the value of the exponent in the problem. If I have a monomial, you're going to add the values of all the exponents together. So if I bring back my favorite, 3x cubed y squared, the degree is going to be 5 because this exponent is 3, this exponent is 2, and 3 plus 2 is 5. If they give you an easy one, like 4x squared, then the degree is just 2 because that's the only exponent in the problem. So if there's more than one variable, we add them together. If there's only one, it's just whatever the degree is. So that's only for monomials. In a binomial and above, the degree is just the value of whatever the largest exponent there is. So if I have 4x plus 3x squared plus 2, I'm going to look for the biggest exponent. That's a 1. That's a 2. So that means the degree here is a 2 because even though this is first, this is the biggest exponent and it's an exponent of 2. If they try and make it really hard, they may give you something like 2 p squared q to the 4th plus p squared. In this case, we can't just look at the numbers because this is a monomial. This one, according to our last rule, is a 6, and this one is only a 2. So even though it looks like a 2, a 4, and a 2, this monomial has a degree of 6, and since that's bigger than 2, the entire thing has a degree of 6. So if they continue to throw those monomials at you, make sure you remember to add them before you compare. Now that you can define polynomials and look at a degree, let's look at examples of non-polynomials. Because when they give you problems asking for, is it a binomial or is it a trinomial, they're going to also throw problems in there that have non-polynomials in them. And that's going to try and throw you off. So the first example of a non-polynomial is if it has a fraction with the variable in the denominator. So something like 1 over x or 2 over 3y. Those are examples of non-polynomials. It is okay just to have a fraction or have a fraction with the variable in the denominator in the numerator. That's okay. The key is the variable cannot be in the denominator of the fraction. The next thing is it can't have a negative exponent. So if I have something like 2x to the negative 2, that doesn't work because that's a negative. Same if I have a monomial that's 3p to the negative 3 q squared. Since that is a negative, it automatically disqualifies everything else in the problem. And then the last thing is if I have a variable inside a square root, something like the square root of x or the square root of 3q. Those are not polynomials because you're not allowed to have the variable under the square root. So this is something you definitely want to have a note of and have written down so that when you look at these problems, you can see, does it match any of those? So if they give you a problem, 2x squared plus 3 over x plus 2, and they say, is that a polynomial? The answer is no, because we can't have that in the denominator. So even though this one's okay and this one's okay, as soon as we have one that's not okay, the whole thing is not a polynomial. So you have to keep an eye out for these negatives. Our last problem we're going to do is just to find the missing exponent. So here we have a problem and making it bigger in case you need it. It says 5x, and that's actually a question mark, not a 2. And then it says y cubed plus xy squared plus 8. And they want it to be a trinomial with a degree of 5. So if I look closer, this one, and we'll call this the degree row, This one has a degree of 0 since there is no variable. If I look at this monomial, I see it has an x and a y. Remember, if there is no number, that's a 1. So that means this one actually has a total degree of 3. And now this one has a degree of 3 plus a question mark. So to get this one to equal 5, we have to ask ourselves, what number plus 3 is 5? And the answer is 2. So the missing exponent would have to be a 2. I hope this video helps you as you're learning about polynomials. Remember, make sure you have this page written down in your notes and keep it in front of you anytime they're asking you about polynomials.